morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's case. The date is December 12th, 2024, and this is case DCI2023-00006. It's a rezoning request to the CPD district and the North Fort Myers planning community. Because this is a quasi-judicial case, all testimony and evidence must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Do we have members of the public here today?
Oh, there's one.
Yes? Okay. And are you familiar with the process, sir, and how we go forward with things? Okay, then I will dispense with those instructions. We can begin with the applicant after I accept. Does staff have the notice of publication?
And I have highlighted the affidavit.
Excellent, thank you. So this will be Staff Exhibit 2. Staff Exhibit 1 is the staff report. And again, this is just the affidavit of publication. So I'm ready to begin whenever the applicant's ready. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. My name is Fred Drovlik from RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture at 1514 Broadway, Suite 201, downtown 33901. I have a couple of things. So I do have for you some exhibits. I have the printout of the PowerPoint. I have an 11 by 17 of the master concept plan and a 24 by 36 as well.
Thank you. So those are the same master concept plans that were in the 48-hour letter?
They are.
Last ones? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So I will accept those as applicant. Exhibit 1 would be the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. And then I will do applicant Exhibit 2 is both master concept plans in those respective sizes. Thank you.
All right, so we're here today. Oh, first, and I would also like to be qualified as an expert witness in land use and planning, and I've been accepted before, and my resume should be on file.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks. So we're here with DCI 2023-00006, Playa del Sol CPD in North Fort Myers. Team here, the owner is owner and developer is Angel Armis, but it's Chris Pisano from that LLC. I'm the planner on here, and then Yuri Baiku is the transportation consultant. And then Shane, I forgot to put Shane on here. I don't know why. Yeah, Shane Johnson's here from Passarella for any environmental questions that we'd have. So, location is in North Fort Myers. So we're on North Cleveland Avenue. We're near where North Tamiami Trail and North Cleveland Avenue come together. So this is in the North Fort Myers community planning area. This is in a really developing, probably underdeveloped at the moment, but quickly developing area with future multifamily, single family surrounding it, new stuff, and older like RV parks and everything, commercial retail plazas. So it's a growing area that has a ton of great infrastructure in place and is really ready for development of this sort, which is, we'll get into the proposal here. It is in, so the request overall is 9.4 acres, the property is. It's currently zoned AG2, and we're going to a commercial plan development for maximum of 350,000 square feet of commercial uses, and that is broken up into 200,000 square feet of warehouse uses and open storage, and 150,000 square feet of commercial retail. Max proposed height would be 75 feet. As mentioned, the zoning is AG2, and we're going to a commercial plan development. The future land use category is central urban, so we believe we're consistent with the use list that we have is consistent with central urban uses. As mentioned, North Fort Myers planning community, we did hold a public meeting. We didn't have anybody in attendance with that, but we do know that particularly here, the owner to the south is here, and there's been some dialogue there, but of course we're open to hear any questions that we have from her. Other than that, we haven't heard any other public or received any emails or calls on this project. It's in the commercial corridor in North Fort Myers planning community per the LDC. So that did have us do some specific requirements with buffers and some other things that we do have some deviations on. so that we can preserve some of the indigenous, and we'll get into those. That's really the most technical part of this presentation. The rest of it, I think, is fairly straightforward. The MCP shows a number of buildings. So we'll start on the south. So on the south end, there's an out parcel that would be a 15,000 square foot commercial building, kind of a typical out parcel that would be, you know, south of the entrance. So we are proposing a new entrance off of North Cleveland Avenue. There is an existing entrance at Playa del Sol to the south. There's really no other access points because this isn't part of this strip isn't part of our property. So there's really no other access point to be gained right now. You know, in preliminary talks with FDOT, they seem to think that it wouldn't be an issue. Of course, we never want to say what FDOT will do or won't do, but this is essential to our project to get that connection completed. We do have a fair amount of intersection separation, and there is room for the turn lane there that would be required for this type of development. So we're pretty confident that that will go through as our main access point. The northern part of the buildings are just warehouse buildings and pretty generic in that request, and then you see the outdoor storage. So this would be, you know, a warehouse use, and you'll probably see a development order on that in relatively short order after the zoning. This has been in the process for a while, but they're ready to move forward on this piece of property. Some of the other features of the MCP, so you know, there's the indigenous preservation requirements. So we are doing the 50% of indigenous along the boundaries on the west and on the north side. There's a fairly significant buffer required in the North Fort Myers community planning area. It's 50 feet in the back, and then there's additional setback to the building from the preserve. So we have, I think, a substantial setback for that building in the back. And we placed this building specifically to hide the majority of the open storage. So this would be landscaped on the back, the preserve area, the type F buffer. We did ask the deviation 4 sitting there is for that type F buffer. So we want it to be indigenous preservation, but if we don't meet the density and the type of plantings after, because there are some exotics in there, I think it's 25% exotic. So if we clear that out and it doesn't meet the density for the plantings for the type F, then we will, there's a condition in there that will enhance those in order to meet that, and then, but keep as much indigenous as possible. Same on the north side, even though the buffer isn't as intense on the north side, we're only required to have a type A there. We have about 20 feet wide so that we could preserve more indigenous on the north. So some of that planting in there is, and the trees are great, and they've been growing for a long time, so we want to preserve as many of those as we can. And there are some wetlands on site. The staff report takes those into consideration. Obviously, will be part of an ERP, you know, environmental resource permit in order to, if there's going to be any impacts to those. Their site plan as shown, there will be impacts to the wetlands, so we do understand. We have the JD on that, but we'll need to, in order to impact it, we'll need to be permitted through South Florida Water Management District. So I think that's the main pieces. There are, because of the North Fort Myers planning community requirements, there's publicly accessible open space that was required. We put that in the front of the commercial buildings to meet that requirement as well. And we're not asking for any other deviations from the North Fort Myers community plan other than those deviations for the buffers, setbacks, and then there are 4 total, and I'll go through those in a little bit of detail. Transportation, so the bottom line, level of service C with the project. So this, in this particular case, in this area, plenty of capacity because of the really great access to arterial roads that we have in this area. So, of course, when we get to the development order, then we'll get to the specific numbers, but we should be okay. Infrastructure, like I mentioned, this area has all the infrastructure in place and is just waiting to grow in order to use it all effectively. So public water and sewer, we have letters of service availability from LCU and from FGUA for water and sewer respectively. Public transit, it's actually, there's the bikeways mapped, a proposed sidewalk on the property. There's northbound and southbound Lee-Tran bus stops. The southbound is less than 1 mile away. The northbound is less than a quarter mile, so within the watershed. And we'll be required to provide sidewalks internal to the project, and we do show those on the MCP and have that circulation from the main sidewalk plan out on North Cleveland Avenue. Police and fire are also available in the area within close proximity. The comprehensive plan consistency, this is just a list of the ones that were either included in my narrative or in the staff report. We agree with the staff findings. They find us consistent as conditioned. We agree with the conditions as well. So we're here and we're not in, we don't have any disagreements going into this. So just want to put on record, we agree with that analysis. We'll let our narrative and the staff report stand for as far as the information about consistency with the comp plan, but we do believe we meet these policies and objectives. LDC as well. So, of course, we're all familiar with Section 34-145, that we must comply with the Lee Plan, and we believe we do, and let the narrative speak for that. Meet the Land Development Code and other applicable county regulations, and that does include the additional sections for the North Fort Myers planning community in Chapter 33, in particular there with the landscape and buffering and other requirements of the commercial corridor. Compatible with the existing and planned uses in the surrounding area. To the north of us is a U-Haul, and has some open storage, and well, it's a typical U-Haul area. Has some kind of warehouse and storage units and open storage as well. That's why we proposed ours to the north to abut that, so that would be a similar use, and then pushed everything away from the west as much as we could, where the proposed multifamily is for the Playa del Sol area development. The other part is the commercial retail that we have. Obviously, this is a commercial corridor. I think that this fits very well. It's near one of the corners of really a local collector, and then the arterial. So we believe this is a good place for the retail as well, and shouldn't affect anybody or any intrusion into residential areas, as we're on a commercial frontage road. As mentioned, the expected impacts on transportation facilities addressed by the county regulations and the condition of approval. So obviously there's FDOT that we need to meet on that, but otherwise it looks like we'll meet the level of service for North Cleveland Avenue. Not adversely affect environmentally critical sensitive areas and natural resources. We'll meet the county requirements for indigenous preservation. We'll preserve as much of the wetland as possible, and obviously we won't impact any more than we're permitted to impact. And we went through urban services, and we are served well on this site. The hearing examiner findings, the proposed use or mixed use is appropriate at the proposed location. We stand with the staff report recommendation of approval on that. Recommended conditions, we are in agreement with those. We believe they provide safeguards for the public interest and are reasonably related to impacts on the public interest expected from the proposed development. Just a little detail on the south boundary. We were zoned agricultural, as was the property to the south of us. We aren't required to have a buffer there because it's agriculture. We did put a type A buffer in, and through Beth and I's conversations, she said she'd also like a hedge there as part of that buffer, so it's an enhanced type A, and that's fine with us. So there is some, in case there's headlights or something from the retail, it's not affecting that piece of property with light intrusion. And then the deviations. So we need to prove that they enhance the achievement of objectives and that they preserve and promote the general intent of this code. So we'll just hit on those quickly, because these deviations, based on the North Fort Myers planning community requirements, we have to meet variance criteria for these deviations. So one is parking lot interconnections and pedestrian and bicycle traffic interconnections. So we are providing, and we'll have to record an easement for a interconnection area to the north. And we're showing that on our plan, and we're actually showing another one to the south as well. So obviously that we can only go to the property that we control. So on our property, we will have those easements posted.
How does that affect the north? Because it shows that it's going through
Yeah.
the buffer and the indigenous preserve. So is that going to be done, the infrastructure improvement at the time of development? So that's going to eat into the space, or are you just reserving the easement?
We're just reserving the easement in case it would be, and then if there's some possibility of interconnection with them to the north, I do think there's an easement recorded on their property as well, but they've used that area for parking and all kinds of other things. So we're just going to reserve the easement and build the infrastructure when the connection would be able to be coordinated and made with the property up north if that works.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then will that affect your open space? Will that be mitigated at the time?
That would have to be mitigated time. We'll probably take that into consideration when we're going in for the development order and make sure that's okay. We're a little bit over on the site plan. I don't think it would affect it where we wouldn't be meeting that, but obviously we'd be required to at the time of development order. So we're probably, as with anything, the zoning plan and the development order, as they work through a final and they get a final builder who's going to do that, it's going to change, and we're probably going to try to reduce the impacts on the wetlands. So that's going to make us preserve more space in order to do that, because really a few more square feet of building versus not paying $100,000 to $200,000 to impact wetlands is probably worth the offset. So we're probably going to do that. And so regardless of what we do, yes, it could affect that, but we'll have to adjust to that, and we're not asking for any deviations from that, from those things. So we'll have to meet that requirement. Number two is for dumpster size enclosures for warehouse uses. This has been approved in a fair amount of commercial plan developments where, you know, the amount of dumpster space required for commercial developments is based on the square footage, and then, you know, these public warehouses take up a ton of square footage but have very few people in and out, and very little trash for the most part. So I mean, it's certainly not on, you know, heavy use on a daily basis like a retail center. So there's been those kind of approvals before. We used similar language that we were in here for a project just 4 or 5 months ago for that. And I do think that that's part of LDC, that they're looking at those changes as well to make that, you know, to help some of this along so we're not constantly doing deviations for the same thing. But in the meantime, it's for the warehouse use only, not for the other parts of this. And then the buffer requirements. These are the two that allow for us to use, instead of buffers, to use the indigenous area. But if we don't meet the requirements of the buffers in those areas, then we'll have to enhance them to bring them up to those standards as well. So we'll preserve as much as we can, bring it up to the standards we need to in order to meet the buffer requirements. And staff does recommend approval of those 4 deviations. The criteria, so this was part of the reason that we had the 48-hour letter and you have those documents. We had this deviation justification language in the original narrative, but then we just, for whatever reason, didn't attach it to a deviation list. So after we started working on the staff report and talking with staff, we were like, hey, let's clean this up, put it in the deviations list, put it, you know, clean up the narrative, make the proper references to the deviations in the narrative as well, and then add those numbers to the MCP. So those were the primary reasons for those 4 documents. So the rest of that has stayed consistent for quite a while in this request. But these are the deviation justifications that we have to meet. It's based on a very typical variance criteria. We do believe that so there's property as an inherent and exceptional condition that causes the application regulation to create a hardship. Yes, it's not. It is a hardship, but we don't want to get rid of indigenous trees that have been growing there for a long time as much as possible. So, in order to remove those, in order to put a buffer in there, or to do, you know, to the reason for the deviation is so we can combine the effort, meet the buffers, but preserve as many of the natural trees as we can. Exceptional conditions, not a result of our actions. The LDC requires us to have that open space. And the natural vegetation has obviously been there on the site for decades. So, and the northern and western boundaries represent the logical and appropriate locations to preserve these high-quality trees as a buffer. Variance granted is the minimum. So the formal wetlands, we do have 1.03 acres of state wetlands on site, and which right now we're proposing 0.7 acres is to be located within the West Indigenous Preserve. So we are preserving this majority of that, but we're actually probably going to push that even higher than that. So granting variance will not be injurious. We believe that we'll meet the type F buffer that would be required, plus we're having additional area and trees and buffers on the natural area. So we actually think this is a healthy enhancement. And consistent with the LEED plan, we agree to the conditions that help us meet the consistency with the LEED plan in this case. So we believe we meet those criteria. It's broken down a little bit more in the narrative, and you can refer to that as part of your assistance in writing this. And then finally, in my professional opinion, as a certified planner, so I agree with staff, we agree with their conditions. We agree that the request is generally consistent with the comprehensive plan's goals, policies, and objectives, the LDC, and other applicable regulations. Staff's recommend approval, and hopefully we have no public opposition. We haven't had so far, but we'll find out. So other than that, I'm here for questions.
So the only warehouse use I think that was requested is a public warehouse. So is that what's contemplated on the site? Like, what are the buildings actually going to look like? Are we talking exterior entry, or is it going to be all interior hallways?
Yeah, probably the main one would be interior. Mini warehouse requires, to be looked at for a few other things. There was a thought that back building would probably be more designed as possibly a mini warehouse, but I haven't, we didn't justify that. We didn't have that as part of the conversation initially. So if that is the case, then we'd have to do an administrative amendment. I do believe it could be considered in the way we advertise it. It could be considered the layout. It would make sense for a mini warehouse, but we did not put that on the use, and that's okay with us.
And the open storage that's there, is it going to be gated, or I assume fenced, definitely, but is it going to be restricted for or not occupants, but is that a separate entity that's going to be operating like for large RVs and those kind of vehicles, or is it just going to be for folks that are already occupants of the storage facilities?
It could be a combination of both. So if that is part of that, yes, there'll be fencing and security there. That would be in a typical storage area like that. So yeah, the answer could be both. We don't have an end user for that piece, but we do for the public warehouse part, because those are all the rage. But the outdoor storage is very much in need as well. So if there's any specific concerns you'd have about that, about it being RV or boat storage for just general public, not just public warehouse users, then we can consider different conditions, but we would want to fence that off. It's kind of the way we designed it, is to have that upper half be fairly linear on there, but we'd have to figure out the smart way to fence that off well and make it look good.
And I think there were a lot of cleanups that were made to the master concept plan. The one thing that still remained is it shows solid waste. It refers to deviation number 5. I don't believe there is a deviation number 5, so that's a very minor thing that needs to be addressed, but we'll need to remove that from the master concept plan. It's right at the top above building 2, or excuse me, deviation 2. So the deviation number is correct,
Yeah.
but I don't know why that's on there.
Yeah, I see yep.
Very minor, but.
Oh, I know. At one point I had a deviation for like interconnection separation, but it's an FDOT. Obviously, we didn't need that, so then my numbers changed. I see.
And I assume with the FDOT, I know you said that you've had positive conversations so far, but is it a concern that you do potentially have that interconnection to the north? Is there any concern that they would require you to utilize that as your access and not give you access on 41?
In initial discussions, they weren't pushing that subject.
Okay.
I mean, I think they would prefer it, but they understand that that isn't the best service for this type of commercial development. So basically, I think really is what we were able to meet with 370 feet. I think they felt that was a reasonable connection separation, that they weren't pushing the subject.
Okay, thank you.
They asked us about us and then moved on pretty quick.
Thank you. I'm ready for staff whenever you are.
Okay.
Unless was there anything else?
Nope.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Beth Workman. I'm a principal planner in the zoning section. I have been accepted as an expert in the land development code as well as the Lee plan, and I wish to be accepted today as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. The first thing I have is the PowerPoint.
Thank you. That'll be staff exhibit 3. Thank you very much.
Okay. So the case before you today is DCI 2023-00006. It is called Playa del Sol at Cleveland Avenue, Commercial Plan Development. As Mr. Dravlik had gone over, it is in North Fort Myers. The proposed development scheme is in 9.4 acres to rezone from agricultural to commercial plan development, and it is to permit a maximum of 350,000 square feet of commercial uses. This includes the 200,000 square feet of warehouse and open storage, 150,000 square feet of commercial retail, and the maximum height is 75 feet. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. So I wanted to go a little bit, when I was writing my staff report, it was interesting the history behind all of these parcels. So when North Cleveland Avenue didn't exist, the parcel to the east was part of the subject property, as well as these two pieces to the south. So this was all one big piece. And then when North Cleveland Avenue was extended, then this was severing these two pieces. And then there was a further split from the subject property to create the two pieces to the south. So you see that the strap numbers for these three have the A, B, and C, and then this strap number stands alone with just the 10. So that was an interesting little piece of how this all came about back in the day. And then you have North Tamiami coming up, meeting in a triangle just to the north. So the future land use category is central urban. This is considered the urban core of Lee County. And what that means is it is heavily settled, or going to be in the future, and that those areas have access to all the public services. So sewer and water, they have a Lee Tram bus route, they have current sidewalks or multi-use paths either in place or proposed. And it's an area of a mix of residential and commercial supporting this part of North Fort Myers. As mentioned, it is in a community planning area of North Fort Myers, and what that means is that this community has their own section of the land development code. So there's certain ins and outs of that code that play into the development of this site. Furthermore, in the North Fort Myers Community Plan, it's in the commercial corridor. And what this means is the parcel is located next to main arterial or collector roads that provide a service not only to the area of North Fort Myers, but passersby. The applicant did conduct a public information meeting with the community to get some feedback on their plan, which is a requirement as part of the Lee Plan as well as the Land Development Code. Going over the surrounding uses, I'm not going to belabor this because Mr. Dravlik kind of went over this a little bit in detail. It should be noted, as he mentioned as well, this is a very large U-Haul facility. So this is an area of the retail auto repair for the U-Haul trucks, and then also the retail area in the front that allows you to buy boxes and things like that. And then this is the U-Haul storage facility. So this is like a warehouse, mini warehouse. They also have overhead doors. Further north is a different commercial uses up in here, auto repair, there's some retail up in this area. And in a further slide, you're gonna see the easement that is running from the U-Haul here all the way up and connects to North Fork Drive. And it's a cross-access easement that has been recorded in this area. To the east is the vacant piece of property zoned AG2, the arterial road of North Cleveland Avenue. To the northeast, you have the racetrack that kind of terminates the end of this point, this triangular point of the two arterials that has 20 fuel pumps there. To the south is Playa del Sol, which is the access point for the overall RPD, CPD back in here. And the RPD is in this portion. The master concept plan for this approval had multifamily in this region. The lake, as you can see, the infrastructure has been installed. So this lake is part of the MCP that's abutting the subject property. The commercial uses to the south, and then you have a highly dense mobile home area to the south of the CPD. The Playa del Sol Boulevard connects to De Navarra Parkway, which is a county-maintained arterial road. That connects to Del Prado. So there's another connection in there. And on the MCP, when we get to it, you'll see the interconnects that are proposed on the subject property. If at such time they can connect to Playa del Sol, that'll give another little area to connect to get out to Pine Island. And this is just the aerial. Overall, I wanted to show, here's our subject property. Here's kind of what we're playing with off of North Cleveland Avenue. There's the Playa del Sol that then connects Dave Navarro, and this is Pine Island. So you can see a lot of the residential as you work towards the west of the subject property. And then I wanted to put the master concept plan on here just so you can see how that kind of interacts with the surrounding uses. And then the interconnect here that the applicant is proposing coming through the indigenous that will connect to possibly that cross-access easement that's here. And this is our master concept plan. Mr. Dravlik went over that in detail, so I'm not gonna go over that. Going over the deviations, deviation 1 has 3 different sections of code that is deviating in deviation 1 due to it being an interconnect deviation for pedestrian, for automobiles, and what it connects to. So the code states that it needs to connect to a parking area or an internal access way. And what the applicant would like to do is connect through this area to the internal access way and not a parking lot. And that's what these sections of code would allow. And that's for bicycle, pedestrian, and automobile traffic. And staff is approving this deviation with condition 8, which is that connector to the cross-access easement, as you can see in pink on this slide. Deviation 2 is the dumpster relief, and Mr. Drawlick went over that in detail as to the why we need this because of the use. There's really no public that's going to produce any garbage at that rate with that size of building. So reducing it, and the applicant shows where that will be, the reductions and where that will be on the master concept plan. Staff has approved that.
Do you know if there's any LDC amendments contemplating that? Because it is one that keeps coming up.
I know that we have, I don't know for sure, but I know that in conversation, we have been talking about this problem of this warehouse problem and the definitions and the changing of that use. And I would contemplate that because of the dumpster deviations that we've been having, that'll coincide with the changes, because it'll be a good nexus in the advisory committee meetings that we go to. So deviation 3 and 4 were added, and in the North Fort Myers community, they have a section in the code that states that if you're going to deviate from landscaping architecturals, you need to meet variance criteria. So this deviation is to allow the indigenous areas to meet the buffer requirements. So there's a conflict in the code because North Fort Myers also has a section of the code in the commercial corridor that says that you need to preserve indigenous trees. So the applicant is preserving indigenous trees and allowing those trees and whatever the understory is native to act as the screening. And that to staff is sort of a hardship because you're trying to balance the code. So in doing so, we've granted the deviation to allow the indigenous to act as the buffer. The only caveat is, and when we get to the flux map, you'll see that wetland that they're preserving in this region right about in here, it's 0.70 acres. That wetland is E4, which is 75% or greater. So it doesn't meet our indigenous definition, and it has a lot of exotics. So when they go in to develop this site, they will be clearing all the exotics out of here, and it'll leave a hole in this. And so they'll have to do a restoration plan. So with that condition 7, what staff has done is we've said, yeah, we'll grant this deviation, but when you do the restoration plant material must meet the heights required to meet the type F buffer in the 10416D as well as 10-420. So that kind of helps with the screening and maintaining that view shed from Playa del Sol RPD CPD. And so the traffic, it is in central urban, future land use category, and with that, as I mentioned, it's in the urban core. So with traffic, you have everything, the table's set. So really all that needs to be reviewed at time of development order is, do you need to put any improvements, offsite improvements, i.e. turn lane? Mr. Drawlick testified that they have allowed enough access area to develop a turn lane at time of development order, and that they are not tripping any thresholds with the uses that are proposed on the site. So it does meet that criteria. Going over a little bit about the wetlands, I did mention, here's that E4 right in here, and you can see there's the property line. So this area will need to be restored. And I just wanted to throw that in there for the 10-420 is the requirements for the height on a type F, which the shrub material is an increased over 12 inches. So they'll have to demonstrate that during restoration. And then here are the other wetlands up front that will be impacted. So there was a formal jurisdictional wetland determination done. It was just a little over an acre of state wetlands, and they're preserving 0.70 acres, or a little bit less than 0.70 acres. So buffering and screening, provide these just because of a policy of the goals 5 for screening for, or goal 6, I'm sorry, for screening for commercial. In North Fort Myers, the right-of-way buffer is required to be 20 feet, which is different from other parts of the county. So the applicant is providing the 20-foot wide buffer with the trees and double hedgerow in that area. The buffering and screening enhancement, this is on the south side. So This is the offsite AG2. There's another AG2 piece, and then Playa del Sol Boulevard would be down in here. This master concept plan is proposed to have parking along the southern buffer. The applicant has provided an enhanced type A. It's enhanced because there's no buffer required in this region when you're commercial abutting AG2. What staff has done is enhance that a little bit further by providing a condition. This is a new condition. It was not in the staff report or in, I think, attachment C, to enhance that with a single hedgerow. And what that does is it shields the parking, the headlight shine, because the trees, you're just gonna have the trunks of the trees. So with that single hedgerow in there, it's gonna screen that parking so that it is preventing any health safety issues with Playa del Sol Boulevard. So that's an added condition that will need to be provided to you. I can do a revised attachment for the conditions. And then this is the western buffer, which the preserve is acting as the buffer. It's 50 feet for a type F buffer. In the other parts of the county, it's 30 feet. So in North Fort Myers, they have an increased when you have commercial next to residential. And deviation 4 has that restoration condition for that wetland area that will need to be restored. And then here's the north piece. Madam Hearing Examiner, you had mentioned the impact if they choose to do a cross access in here. What could happen depending on how that plays, because the open space is conditioned in this, would be an administrative deviation. It wouldn't be less than 10, or more than 10%, so it wouldn't need to go to public hearing. So it could be administered through the ADD process in this region if that goes through time of DO. And this is the type A buffer, which is required. It is 5 feet, and it's 4 trees for every 100 feet. And then the open storage needs to be screened as well. So in LDC section 343005, that section of code states that if your open storage area is visible by residential, it needs to be screened with an 8-foot wall, or you could use vegetation. If it's visible from the right-of-way, then it needs to be screened by a 6-foot wall or vegetation. And so the applicant has noted this, that there will be screening via fencing around this area. And so the open space, it is required to be 30% of the overall site. So that's 2.82 acres of open space. Of that, half of it is represented as indigenous, so 1.41. The applicant is in compliance with the open space and indigenous open space requirements. Urban services are available. Mr. Drovlik went over that in detail. There is a multi-use path. There's adequate roadway infrastructure, and there are utilities. There was an issue with the letter of availability, but that was handled during the 48-hour letter, so that's been dealt with. And then staff finds the application to be consistent with the lead plan as the presentation has gone over with the policies in mind. And the findings and conclusions that staff finds that the application is consistent with the Land Development Code 34-145.
The screening, you said if it's visible from the residential, so is it only going to be on that northwestern corner because that's where the view shed would be from the multifamily with that lake?
Yes, so if I take it to the actual master concept plan, so they're showing this note right in here, and then the building acts as the screening for the open storage the rest of the way. And I mean, the lake is right over in here off site, but you still have the multifamily that's coming in. So it would be visible from that residential component right there. So they would need to screen that somehow.
Only along the northwest.
Only along the northwest, yes, sorry, northwest.
That was actually my only question. You answered all of the other questions that I had in your presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Very thorough. Okay, We will open public comment then now. I only had one card here from Mr. Jansen, or excuse me, Ms. Jansen, Kathy Jansen. I apologize, my glasses.
The only comment I have is.
I'm sorry, could you come to the forward? I'm sorry, ma'am. Thank you. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. The only comment I have is maintaining access to my property.
Okay,
my
and which
question.
property would be yours?
The property immediately to the south.
Okay. And the concern that you have, I'm sorry, it's about.
Well, just access to the property, since they're moving the access to the 9.4 acres.
Have they shown you the master concept plan? Because they've indicated, I assume this is your property here, that they've got, so they
Correct.
have one access point that would be connecting.
There
to yours.
is.
So you have concern about that?
Well, there is an access point. I did not see that. I just was looking, but there is an access point on, after the 41 entrance to theirs, and there is that one right there. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. So that
So
was
it
really
has to come through 41 and then on to their property.
So that, where the indication of the arrow is right now, and I can let applicant testify to anything they need to, but what they've testified to today is that they're in discussions with FDOT, who manages 41 access, and so they've gotten preliminary indications that they would be able to have an access point where the arrow is showing. In addition to that, they've got interconnections to your property to the south and a potential one to the north.
North. It was more explained very well to the north, not to the south.
Okay, and I
Okay.
can ask them to provide more information on that as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, if you could come back up, please, and just describe. And again, the reason that we had, I think, the discussion on the north was because that was going through the preserve area. But what is the intention for the south? Will that be improved at the same time as the development order?
Well, I mean, that would depend on, I mean, her desires. I mean, we wouldn't need to. We're going to put the easement in there to have that there. We actually have two proposed. I mean, only one would really be necessary, but we have one on the back side as well that would just make sense if say they combine hers with other properties and it turned into a retail center or something, that would make sense to have one in the front and one in the back, just for proper circulation. But we can discuss that with the applicant. I mean, I don't think we're opposed to that. It's just a stub out there to our property line. Not a big deal. So if that's something she desires, that's fine, more than versus just an easement. So, but we are going to establish the legal access there and then improve it if she would want that.
Let me check that. Is there a condition currently that requires the access easement to the south? I don't recall offhand.
I don't think so.
No, I didn't put a condition in there just because they don't own that piece directly to the south. If at such time they were to purchase, or if Ms. Jensen would want to go in on an application, then they would have to come back before.
Okay, because we do have the condition on the north, but not
Yeah,
on the south.
and there's no access easements currently on that immediate south, anything in there.
So does the current access easement that you showed in the pink crosshatch, does that end at this property line?
Yes.
So we've got this condition to
Yes.
extend it through the
Correct.
property?
There's two access easements to the north. There's one just directly adjacent to, that has an instrument number recorded, and then there's one just to the north of that that hits North Fork, and then extends and connects them all. And they all have permission to use that.
So did the applicant consider that, or would you be amenable to that, to continue it? Because there is some benefit, as you said, potentially to connect down to Playa del Sol if those two southerly pieces were to develop. I think you testified to that and have cross-access to create that kind of thoroughfare. Or
Yeah.
it's essentially going to operate as almost a frontage road or a reverse frontage road at that point.
Yeah, reverse frontage road, yeah.
Through parking areas, which isn't ideal, but in this area with the growth that you've discussed, is that something that the applicant would be open to a condition?
Yeah, I think it's good planning. I mean, to
Continue
do
it.
that, to keep people from having to jump out onto 41 just to jump back in. So, yeah.
Right, and I see her concern because the narrowness of her property on 41, as well as the one below it,
Correct.
would be difficult, I think, to meet separation requirements.
Yeah, so that one and the other one are both owned by Angel Armis, it's the same applicant. but it's Miss Jansen's strip in the center is the one that's not. So yeah, the part of her preserved access is that if, yeah, she needs access, we understand that, so that's why the easement to the south. But it's also that if there would be future, development and she would, go together, then this would turn into probably a retail corner.
Okay.
But yes, we're willing to do the easement, continue the easement through, and if she would want us to improve it to her property for the stub out, that's fine as well.
Was there anything final that the applicant wanted to put on the record otherwise?
Nope.
Did staff have anything further?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I'd like to leave the record open then for the modification to the master concept plan and then addressing those two conditions, the new one that staff proposed about the buffer for the headlight shine shield in the south, as well as modifying, I think you could just add it to condition 8 to address the southern access connection. We've already got a connection condition about the northern, but you can just add that maybe as a subset or a new condition, however you feel that would be best addressed. And how long do you think that you guys would need to do that? We're going into the holidays, I recognize, so there wouldn't be any.
I can have my part done by the end of the day tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Where are we at? Today's the 12th. All right, let's just, oh, that's Friday the 13th. Okay, let's do by end of business on Friday the 13th. If anything changes, as always, just let my office know and we can grant an extension. But thank you. Again, it was a very thorough staff report, very thorough presentation. I had a lot of questions as I went through and you both addressed them, so thank you for that. And then Ms. Jansen, if you wanted to stay after, and they can discuss potentially what they're going to be proposing for that access to the south, since you're both here, that might be fruitful for you today. And then you'll receive a copy of the recommendation that I issue to the board, and it'll go to the board before final approval. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. Please stay well, stay safe, and have happy holidays.
Thank you. You too.